resettlement program has been cut by 75% since President Trump took office, splitting families apart and leaving some of the world's most vulnerable in danger. There have been talks that the number will be slashed to zero. What will you do to ensure that America returns to being a land of welcome?
Well, first, do you mind if I stand? Is that all right?
Sure, you can stand.
First, of course, we will repeal the Muslim ban. And second of all, as I mentioned, as someone who is the son of an immigrant, we will create immigration policies that are just, that bring families together, and that do not divide families up. And that means moving toward comprehensive immigration reform in this country for the 11 million undocumented. And it means having a border asylum process which is based on humanitarianism and compassion, where we understand that when people travel long distances with little babies to flee violence and poverty, they are not criminals. And to understand most importantly, and I speak again as the son of an immigrant, this country was built by immigrants. Let us never forget that.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. I wanted to ask you about this problem, this threat of white nationalism. I remember working out of our D.C. office when the Alfred Murrah building was bombed by white nationalists. And after that, there was an anti-terrorism bill, but part of the anti-terrorism bill had something called the use of secret evidence, which was unfortunately applied against our community. So how do we deal with this double standard of counterterrorism, where Muslims always feel that they are singled out? And how do we deal with the white nationalist threat that is not so domestic anymore, because they are influenced by Christchurch in New Zealand, also influenced by European fascist groups on the rise, if not supported by them?
When we look at the growth of white nationalism, we have got to approach it as if it were and is domestic terrorism. All right? Donald Trump has cut back on the funding that governmental agencies need in order to address this crisis, to be able to identify who the white nationalists are, their penchant for violence, where they're getting their information. I will not cut back on funding. We will increase funding, and we will make white nationalists understand that we will not accept their behavior for 1 second. And I think maybe most importantly, what a president of the United States can do is, unlike Trump, who is fomenting hatred and divisiveness, we need a president to remind the American people that no matter where we came from, no matter what our religion is, no matter what the color of our skin is, we are Americans, and that this country will do best when we work together, when we stand together, when we pray together, when we come together as one nation.
Senator, just today there was another mass shooting here in Texas. It seems every week or 2 weeks there's a mass shooting somewhere in America that affects all of us, irrespective of our religion. How will you address this issue in a meaningful way, or help this country move forward in a meaningful way if elected president?
You're absolutely right. It is, it's an issue that I almost don't like talking about, because it is so painful and so horrific to think that a human being could walk into a school or a shopping mall and take out an assault weapon and start shooting down other human beings. But obviously, we have a major crisis in front of us that has to be dealt with. And you're asking me what I would do as president, and what I would do is what the American people want us to do. The truth is that while there are nuances of difference, people all across this country in rural areas, gun owners, non-gun owners, urban residents, understand that we must act boldly to address this crisis. What does that mean? Overwhelmingly, the American people believe we should significantly expand background checks. People who should not own guns must not own guns. We have got to do away with the so-called gun show loophole where people can avoid background checks. We have got to do away with the so-called straw man provision where you could legally buy guns and then sell them to criminal elements. And I'm proud to say that more and more Americans are coming aboard a position that I've held for 30 years, and that is the understanding that assault weapons, semi-automatic weapons, are designed for one thing. They are military-style weapons designed to kill human beings as rapidly as possible, and that we must end the sale and distribution of those assault weapons. This is what the American people want. And the reason that Congress is not acting is very simple and straightforward. And that is, we have a Republican Party that is intimidated by the NRA. I will not be intimidated by the NRA.
Senator Sanders, you mentioned a comprehensive immigration plan. As someone who is of Yemeni descent, and Yemeni Americans and their families have really felt the brunt of the Muslim ban. We have families scattered in Djibouti, Malaysia, India, and China who fled from the war. We also have people on the borders who've suffered greatly. What specific policy changes would you make, both in border enforcement and the asylum process, to ensure people fleeing human rights violations have a fair chance to ask for protection in the United States?
Well, for a start, as I mentioned in my remarks, we will do everything that we can possibly do to end U.S. participation in the horrific war there and try to bring that war to a close, to rebuild the Yemeni economy and bring back some hope to a people who are now living in very sad state. As I indicated earlier, the policy of my administration is to bring families together in a non-racist immigration policy, and we will do everything we can to allow those people who have relatives here in the United States to become once again part of their family and end that separation.
Senator, I'm from Los Angeles, and we have a crisis in terms of the homeless problem. There are tens of thousands of homeless people encamped along the riverbank, and they are right next to skyscrapers that are built where housing units are being sold for over $1 million per unit. How can we, the United States of America, the richest country in the world, and in a state, California, one of the richest states of our union, tolerate that? What will you do in terms of a strategy as president to deal with the homeless crisis?
You are quite right, and that homelessness is a manifestation of a very backward set of priorities that we have in this country. Under Trump, we gave well over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the very wealthiest people in this country and large corporations. And yet today, in Los Angeles County, there are over 50,000 people who are homeless, and in America today, over 500,000 people who are homeless. So when I talk, as I do often, about rebuilding America's infrastructure, I'm just not talking about roads and bridges. We're talking about building the millions of units of affordable housing that this country desperately needs. We're also talking, when we talk about the housing crisis, it is not just homelessness, as bad as that is. It is the fact that millions of our people are spending 40, 50, or 60% of their limited incomes on housing. And if you spend that much, you don't have terribly much money left over for other things. We're also talking about the very significant impact that gentrification is having in communities all over America, where fancy condos are replacing the homes that working class people have lived in for their entire lives. So we will be announcing a significant and comprehensive housing program to deal with homelessness, to build the affordable housing units that we need to give communities the ability to fight gentrification. And when we do all of that, by the way, we're going to create millions of good-paying jobs.
Senator, I want to ask you a question about a topic that's very difficult and something that I worked on when I was at the State Department for many years. There are 3 million people right now in Syria, half of them are children, who are enduring perhaps the world's worst humanitarian disaster, including constant bombardments by the Russians and the Syrian regime Air Force. Many are already displaced and are sleeping in the open along the Turkish border, which is close to them. Do you support any measures above and beyond everything that has been tried so far diplomatically? Whether a no-fly zone, whether working in concert with allies to protect the people in that part of the world?
In a world of many humanitarian disasters, Syria is up there in the top. And as you indicate, there is massive suffering. There is a regime that has total contempt for its own people and strives at all costs to maintain its power. I think the best that we can do is to demand that the major countries of this world come together and not ignore this issue, which right now has been swept under the rug, and appreciate the humanitarian crisis that exists and do everything we can to protect the very vulnerable people right now in Syria.
I guess I'll have one more. One more question. You have courageously spoken about the need for a Palestinian state and for protecting the rights of Palestinians as much as we want to protect the rights and the freedom of Israelis. Do you think that Americans should be criminalized, sanctioned, or denied government contracts or jobs for engaging in peaceful boycott activities or criticism of other governments or their policies?
As it happens, for a variety of reasons, I do not support the BDS movement. But I do think that the American people have a constitutional right to do what they want without worrying about losing their job or their employment. So my answer is I personally do not support that movement, but I would not support not allowing other Americans to support it.
Thank you.
So your time has come to a close. We so appreciate you coming today, participating with us, being very candid on what you want to do if you become president. Thank you so much, and we will see you soon. Much luck to you and success.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.